So good day. Our topic for today is about project management processes. So project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet the project requirements. This application of knowledge requires the effective management of the project management processes. So a knowledge area in the identified area of the project management defined by its knowledge requirements and described in terms of its component processes, practices, inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques. So we have phases. No? So a project management process group is logical grouping of project management processes to achieve a specific project objectives, while the project phase is a collection of logically related project activities that culminates in the collection of one or more deliverables. Now, so based on the given definition, no, so project management is an application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet the project requirements. So this application of knowledge requires the effective management of the project management processes. A process is a set of interrelated actions and activities performed to create a pre-specified product, service, or result. Each process is characterized by its inputs, the tools and techniques that can be applied, and the resulting outputs. The project manager needs to consider organizational process asset and enterprise environmental factors, and this should be taken into account for every process. So even if they are not explicitly listed as inputs in the process specification, we need to take note that organizational process assets provide guidelines and criteria for tailoring the organization's processes to the specific needs of the project. So, enterprise environmental factors may constrain the project management options. So, in order for a project to be successful, the project team should be must select appropriate processes required to meet the project objectives. Use a defined approach that can be adapted to meet requirements. We need to establish and maintain appropriate communication and engagement with the stakeholder, because it is very important to us to consult the stakeholders. This method or these tools show in our agile tools, no? Comply with requirements to meet stakeholder needs and expectations. So we see to it that that the requirement is based on the stakeholder needs and expectation. We need to balance the competing constraint of scope, schedule, budget, quality, resources, and risk to produce the specified product, service as a result. The project processes are performed by the project team with stakeholder interaction in general fall into one of two major categories. So we have the project management processes. These processes ensure the effective flow of the project throughout its life cycle. So we discussed it already, the life cycle. And these processes encompass the tools and techniques involved in applying the skills and capabilities described in the knowledge areas. On the other hand, product-oriented processes, these processes specify and create the project's product. So product-oriented processes are typically defined by the project life cycle and vary by application area as well as the phase of the product life cycle. So the scope of the project cannot be defined without some basic understanding of how to create the specified product. So, for example, various construction techniques and tools need to be considered when determining the overall complexity of the house to build. The project management processes, although product-oriented, are outside the scope of the document, This should not be ignored by the project manager and project team. Project management processes and product-oriented processes overlap and interact throughout the life of a project. We need to consider that the project management processes apply globally and across industry groups. So good practice means there is a general agreement that the application of project management processes have been shown to enhance the chances of success over a wide range of projects. We need to take note that good practice does not mean that the knowledge, skills, and processes described should always be applied uniformly on all projects. For any given project, the project manager in collaboration with the project team is always responsible for determining which processes are appropriate and the appropriate degree of rigor for each process. So, the project managers and their teams should carefully address each project or each process and its inputs and outputs, and they need to determine which are applicable to the project they are working on. So, may be used as a resource in managing a project while considering the overall approach and methodology to follow their project. So, the project management is an integrative undertaking that requires each project and product process during one process, typically affect the process and other related processes. So, for example, let's say a scope change typically affects project cost, but it may not affect the communication management plan or level of risk. This process interaction often required trade-offs among project requirements and objectives, and the specific performance trade-offs will vary from project to project and organization to organization. Successful project management includes actively managing this interaction to meet sponsor, customer, and other stakeholder requirements. In some circumstances, a process or a set of processes will need to be iterated several times in order to achieve the required outcome. Projects exist within an organization and do not operate as a closed system. We need to take note that they require input data from the organization and beyond and deliver capabilities back to the organization. The project processes may generate information to improve the management of future projects and organizational process assets. Actually, the PMBOK describe the nature of project management processes in terms of the integration between the processes, their interaction, and the purposes they serve. The project management processes are grouped into 5 categories known as project management process groups. Okay, so the project management process, we have initiating process group, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling, and the closing process group. The remainder of the section provide information for project management of a simple project organized as network of interlinked processes. The details of project management processes include the following major sections. So we discuss it later. Okay. So as what we have here, this will be the common project management process interaction. The project management processes are presented now as discrete elements with well-defined interfaces. However, in practice, they overlap and interact in ways that are not completely detailed in this document. Most experienced project management practitioners recognize there is more than one way to manage a project. So the required process groups and their processes are guides for applying appropriate project management knowledge and skills during the project. The application of the project management processes is iterative and many processes are repeated during the project. So, the integrative nature of the process management requires the monitoring and controlling process group to interact with other process groups. So, as shown here in figure 3.1 or 3-1 rather, Monitoring and controlling processes occur at the same time as process contained within other process group. Thus, the monitoring and controlling process is pictured as a background, no? As what we have here. Process group or the other four process group. The project management process groups are linked by the outputs which are produced. So, the process groups are seldom either discrete or one-time events, and they are overlapping activities that occur throughout the project. So, the output of one progress or process generally becomes an input to another process or as a deliverable of the project or sub-project or project-based. Deliverables at the sub-project or project level may be called incremental deliverables. No? So the planning process group provides the executing process group with the project management plan in project documents and as the project progresses. It often creates updates to the project management plan and the project documents. So, as illustrate here on how the process groups interact and show the level of overlap at various times if the project is divided into phases, the project or the process groups interact within each phase. So, an example of this interaction is the exit of the design phase, so as what we have here, which requires sponsor acceptance of the document or the design document. So, once it is available, the design document provides the product description for the planning and executing process group in one or more subsequent phases. When a project is divided into phases, the process group are used as appropriate to effectively drive the project to completion in a controlled manner. Actually, in multi-phase projects, no, processes are repeated within each phase until the criteria for phase completion had been satisfied. And additional information on the project organizations, life cycle, and project phases is provided. Must be provided actually. So, the project management process groups. So, we need to identify and describe the 5 project management process groups required for any project. So, these 5 process groups have clear dependencies and are typically performed in each project and highly interact with one another. So, these 5 project groups are independent of application areas or industry focus. Individual process groups and individual processes are often iterated prior to completing the project and can have interaction within a process group and among process groups. The nature of this interaction varies from project to project and may or may not be performed in a particular order. So, as what we have here in our process flow diagram, it provides an overall summary of the basic flow and interaction among process groups and specific stakeholder. The project management processes are linked by specific inputs and outputs where the result of or outcome of one process becomes the input to another process but not necessarily in the same process group. So, the process groups are not project life cycle phases. In fact, it is possible that all process groups could be conducted within a phase, no? So, projects are separated into distinct phases or subcomponents such as concept development, feasibility study. Sometimes we need to develop design. We also provide prototype. We need to build or test in others. All of the process groups would normally be repeated for each phase or subcomponent along the lines explained previously in our past lesson. The project management processes are shown in the process group in which most of the related activities takes place. So for example, a process that normally takes place in the planning phase is put into the planning process group. When this process is updated by the executing process group, process or activity, it is not considered a new process within the executing process group, but is still a planning process group process or activity. The iterative nature of project management means that processes from any group may be reused throughout the project life cycle. So for example, in response to a risk event, no, executing a risk response may trigger further analysis, which leads to another iteration of the identity or identify risk process and the associated perform quantitative risk analysis and perform quantitative risk analysis processes to evaluate the impact. So, as what we have here in initiating process group, no? So, based on what we have here, the phases, we have initiation, planning, execution, and close out. So, when it comes to groups, we have initiating groups, planning groups, executing group, monitoring and controlling group, and closing group. Then, under knowledge areas, we have integration, scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, communication, risk, procurement, and stakeholder. The processes and activities to identify, define, combine, unify, and coordinate the various processes and project management activities within the project management process or group. The initiating process group consists of those processes performed to define a new project or a new phase of an existing project by obtaining authorization to start the project or phase. So within the initiating processes, the initial scope is defined and the initial financial resources are committed. But of course, internal and external stakeholders who will interact and influence the overall outcome of the project are identified. If not already assigned, the project manager will be selected. So this information is captured in the project charter and stakeholder register. So when the project charter is approved, the project becomes officially authorized. So although the project management team may help write the project charter, this standard assumes that business case assessment, approval, and funding are handled externally to the project boundaries. And a project boundary is defined as the point in the time of the project or project phase is authorized to its completion. The key purpose of the process group is to align the stakeholders' expectation with the project purpose. So, when it comes to scope, the processes required to ensure that the project includes all the work required and only the work required to complete the project successfully. For the schedule, the processes required to manage the timely completion of the project. Again, so we are always based on our Gantt chart. So the start and end of our project. So about the schedule, again, the process required to manage the timely completion of the project, no? So we need to do it because we need to deliver the project on time in a defined time frame. So about the cost, the processes involved in planning, estimating, budgeting, financing, funding, managing and controlling costs so the project can be completed within the approved budget. Take note of it. It must be within the approved budget. For the quality, the processes for incorporating the organization's quality policy regarding planning, managing and controlling project, and product quality requirements in order to meet stakeholders' expectations. So that's why there are certain tests, no? As much as possible, we always ask them to join in our team for them to keep updated to the status of the project. Then for the resources, no, the processes to identify, acquire, and manage the resources needed for the successful completion of the project. So again, it is very important to us, to the team, no, that we need to consider, or we need to know what are the available hardware or software in our clients, no? Specifically, for example, so if you are creating a large system, so you need to consider what are the available hardware at what are the available software. So what are the uh, how about the technical know-how of their staff, no? How about the other department? Do they have already a system running? And so on. So when it comes to communication, which is very important, no, the processes required to ensure timely and appropriate planning, collection, creation, distribution, storage, retrieval, management control, monitoring, and ultimate disposition of project information. So we need to have a direct contact with our stakeholders. We communicate everything with them as much as possible, no? And we must follow the right protocol based on your approved project management plan. When it comes to risk, no? The processes of conducting risk management planning, identification, analysis, response planning, response implementation of monitoring risk on a project. So at early stage, no, we need to identify the possible risk, no. So at present, no. So for example, you are now working in a project in Accenture, but due to pandemic, no, some of your colleagues, no, your team members are decided to work from home. So how you'll be able to deal with it, and how you'll be able to handle that one, and what are the possible risks, no? Then the procurement. Okay? So the processes necessary to purchase or acquire products, services, or result needed from the outside the project. So for example, you need to consider how many computers, for example. Okay? So we need to provide, of course, the possible infrastructures, no, and so on. The Of course, the stakeholder, okay? So, the process is required to identify the people. We need to identify the people, the groups, or organization that could impact or to impacted by the project. So, to analyze stakeholder expectation and their impact on the project. And to develop appropriate management strategies for effectively engaging stakeholders in project decisions and execution. Again, the processes inform to define a new project or a new phase of an existing project by obtaining authorized to start the project or phases. So, under groups. We are now under groups initiating. Again, the information is captured in the project charter in stakeholder register. So, when the project charter is approved, the project becomes officially authorized. So although the project management team may help write the project charter, this standard assumes that business case assessment, approval, and funding are handled externally to the project boundaries. A project boundary is defined as the point in time that a project or project phase is authorized to its completion. The key purpose of the process group is to align the stakeholders' expectation with the project purpose, give them visibility about the scope and objectives, and show how their participation in the project and its associated phases can ensure that their expectations are achieved. And this process helps set the vision of the project and what is needed to be accomplished. So the large complex project should be divided into separate phases, no? In such projects, the initiating processes are carried out during subsequent phases to validate the decision made during the original developed project charter and identify stakeholder processes. So performing the initiating process at the start of each phase helps to keep the project focused on the business need that the project was undertaken to address. The success criteria are verified and the influence, drivers, and objectives of the project stakeholders are reviewed. Because a decision is then made as to whether the project should be continued, delayed, or discontinued. Involving the sponsor, okay, as what we discussed earlier, no? The customers and the stakeholders during initiation creates a shared understanding of success criteria, reduce the overhead of involvement, and generally improves deliverable acceptance, customer satisfaction, and other stakeholder satisfaction. Again, initiating processes may be performed at the organizational, program, or portfolio level, and therefore would be outside of the project's level of control. So, for example, prior to commencing a project, the need for high-level requirements may be documented as part of a larger organizational initiative. So, a process of evaluating alternatives may be utilized to determine the feasibility of the new undertaking. Clear descriptions of the project objectives may be developed, including the reasons why a specific project is the best alternative to satisfy the requirements, and the documentation for this decision may also contain the initial project scope statement, deliverables, project durations, and a forecast of the resources for the organization investment analysis. And as part of the initiating processes, the project manager, again, is given the authority to apply organizational resources to the subsequent project activities. So, the planning process group. So, the planning process consists of those processes performed to establish the total scope of the effort, define and refine the objectives, and develop the course of action required to attain those objectives. So, the planning processes develop the project management plan and the project documents that will be used to carry out the project. So, the complex nature of the project management may require the use of repeated feedback loops for additional analysis. As more project information or characteristics are gathered and understood, additional planning will likely be required. Significant changes occurring throughout the project lifecycle trigger a need to revisit one or more of the planning processes and possibly some of the initiating processes. This progressive detailing of the project management plan is called progressive elaboration, indicating that the planning and documentation are iterative and ongoing activities. The key benefit of this process is to delineate the strategy and tactics as well as the course of actions or path to successfully complete the project or phases. When the planning process group is well managed, it is much easier to get stakeholder buy-in and engagement. And this process has expressed how this will be done, setting the route to the desired objective. Again, the project management plan and project documents develop as outputs from the planning process group. We'll explore all aspects of the scope, time, cost, quality, communications, human resources, risk, procurements, and stakeholder engagement. Updates arising from approved changes during the project, during monitoring and controlling processes, and specifically during the direct and managed project work process, may significantly impact parts of the project management plan and the project documents. So, the planning process group required to establish the scope of the project, again, and to attain the objectives that the project was undertaken to achieve. So this will be the planning process and the project management plan and project documents. So when it comes to executing process group, no? So processes performed to complete the work defined in the project management plan to satisfy the project requirements. So the executing process consists of those processes performed to complete the work defined in the project management plan to satisfy the project specifications. And this process group involves coordinating people and resources, managing stakeholder expectation, as well as integrating and performing the activities of the project in accordance with the project management plan. During project execution, result may require planning updates and rebaselining. This may include changes to expected activity durations, changes in resource productivity and availability, and anticipated risk. Such variances may affect the project management plan or project documents and may require detailed analysis and development appropriate project management processes and responses. So the result of the analysis can trigger change requests that, if approved, may modify the project management plan or other project documents and possibly require establishing new baselines. No? So a large portion of the project budget will be extended in performing the executing process group processes. So the monitoring and controlling process group, no, the process is required to track, review, and regulate the progress and performance of the project, identify any areas in which changes to the plan are required, and initiate the corresponding changes. So the monitoring and controlling process group consists of those processes required to track, review, orchestrate, and progress and performance of the project. Identify any areas in which changes to the plan are required and initiate the corresponding changes. So the key benefit of this project process group is that project performance is measured and analyzed at regular intervals, appropriate events, or execution conditions to identify variances from the project management plan. So the monitoring and controlling process group involves the following. Okay, controlling changes and recommending corrective or preventive action in anticipation of possible problems. Monitoring the ongoing project activities against the project management plan and the project performance measurement baseline and influencing the factors that could circumvent integrated change control and configuration management so only approved changes are implemented. We need to take note, no? This continuous monitoring provides the project team insight into the health of the project and identifies any areas requiring additional attention. The monitoring and controlling process group not only monitors and controls the work being done within a process group, but also monitors and controls the entire project effort. In multi-phase projects, the monitoring and controlling process group coordinates project phases in order to implement corrective or preventive action to bring the project into compliance with the project management plan. So this review can result in recommended and approved updates to the project management plan. So for example, a missed activity finish date may require adjustment and trade-offs between budget and schedule objectives. So, in order to reduce or control overhead, management by exemption procedures and other techniques can be appropriately considered. So, in closing project, no, close project or phases, the closing process group consists of those processes performed to conclude all activities across all project management process groups to formally complete the project phase or contractual obligations. So, This process group, when completed, verifies that the defined processes are completed within all of the process group to close the project or project phase as appropriate and formally establish the project and project phase is completed. So, this process group also formally establishes the premature closure of the project. So, prematurely closed projects may include, for example, aborted projects, canceled projects, and projects having the critical situations. So, in specific cases, no, when some contracts cannot be formally closed, for example, claims, termination clauses, and others, or some activities are to be transferred to other organizational units, specific handover procedures may be arranged and finalized. So, at project or phase closure, the following may occur. So, we need to obtain acceptance, conduct post-project or phase end review, record impacts of tailoring or to any process, document lesson learned, apply appropriate updates to organizational process asset, archive all relevant project documents in the project management information system to be used as historical data, close out of procurement activities ensuring termination of the relevant agreements, and perform team members assessment and release project resources. So the processes performed to formally complete or close the project phase or close the contract. So throughout the life cycle of the project, no, a significant amount of data and information is collected, analyzed, transformed, and distributed in various formats to project team members and other stakeholders. Project data are collected as a result of various executing processes and are shared within the project team. So the collected data are analyzed in context and aggregated and transformed to become project information during various controlling processes. So the information may then be communicated verbally or stored and distributed as reports in various formats. So the project data are continuously collected and analyzed during the dynamic context of the project execution. And as a result, the terms data and information are often used interchangeably in practice. So the indiscriminate use of this term can lead to confusion and misunderstanding by the various project stakeholders. So the following guidelines help minimize miscommunication and help the project team use appropriate terminology. So we have work performance data, work performance information, and work performance reports. So this will be a project data, information, and the report flow of the common project management process interaction. So the role of the knowledge areas. Okay? So the project management processes identified in the PMBOK guide are further grouped into 10 separate knowledge areas. So knowledge areas represent a complete set of concepts, terms, and activities that make up a professional field. So project management field or area of specialization. These 10 knowledge areas are used in most projects most of the time. So project teams should utilize these 10 knowledge areas and other knowledge areas as appropriate for their specific project. So the knowledge areas are project integration, project scope, project time, project quality, project human resource management, project communication, project risk, project procurement, project stakeholder, and each knowledge area within the PMBOK guide is contained in a separate section. So, we define the important aspect of each knowledge area and how it integrates with the 5 process groups as supporting elements. So, the knowledge area provides a detailed description of the process inputs and outputs along with descriptive explanation of tools and techniques most frequently used within the project management processes to reduce its outcome. a data flow diagram, which is also, I think, all of you are familiar since you already finished with the system analysis and design and even software engineering, no? It provides in each knowledge outputs that flow down through all the processes within a specific knowledge area. So as what we have here, although the processes are presented here as discrete elements with well-defined interfaces, actually, in practice, they are iterative and can overlap and interact in ways not detailed here in our figure. So this table reflects the mapping of the 47 project management processes within 5 project management process groups and the 10 knowledge area. So this will be the symbol, commonly used symbols for the data flow diagram. So for the project manager and team, execute the 49 processes to achieve the project objective. So this will be our references. The PMBOK Guide, 6th edition. So thank you and enjoy learning. God bless everyone.